This is a series of videos about database fundamentals, and we'll look at a little bit of the history and some of the terms related to databases first. A database is a collection of data. It's a container for data, and how that data is organized determines what type of database you have. Over the history of computers, there have been different types of databases. A introduction to computers would probably talk about hierarchical and network databases. But over the last 25 years, the relational database has been the most prevalent. You may have also heard of SQL or SQL, which is structured query language. And this is a computer language specifically for working with relational databases. And today you might also hear about non-relational databases, especially things that we refer to as unstructured data, and this would be things off of social media on the internet. And also the term NoSQL is frequently used, and that means not only SQL. But we're going to focus on relational databases. E.F. Codd is a researcher, or was a researcher at IBM, and he published a paper in the 1970s, early on, in which he proposed the terminology and principles for storing accounting data based on relational algebra. Peter Chin came up with the concepts and symbols for the entity relationship model, and this modeling approach has been widely used to depict data, the design of a database, and the actual how the database itself is actually built. Now, Chin had his recommended notation, what symbols to use, and there have been others that have proposed different symbols, although they're all make use of the same concepts related to data modeling. So you might see slightly different graphics, but the data modeling is essentially the same. So for example, here we see a entity relationship diagram. This is for an auto repair business, and the notation that you see, the symbols, is referred to as crow's feet, and that's where you see this little symbol here. Each box, each rectangle is an entity. An entity is something we want to keep data about. Each line represents a relationship. So one entity is related to another entity. In this case, a customer is related to data about a vehicle. What you see here would be considered a logical model, a fairly abstract model. And you can take that though and add more detail, and you will actually have the blueprint for how to build the relational database. Generally speaking, entities become tables in the database, and in that table you have columns and rows. Columns would represent the attributes, the things that describe something about that entity, in this case the customer entity, so we'd have first name, last name, phone number. And the rows represent individual occurrences of that entity, one individual customer, for example. So why bother with databases? Because everybody, businesses, government, schools, everybody needs to keep track of data over time. So you as a business would want to keep information about customers and your inventory. As a nonprofit, you would want to keep track of donors and the amount they've given over time. So it's important to store that data and be able to retrieve the information. And we do make a distinction between information and data. We say that information takes raw data but organizes it in a way that makes it more useful to individual people. So raw data could be all the first name, last names, phone numbers, and so on and so forth about the employees, but we might want just a list of the employees that work in the marketing department. So we can extract that data and have it organized in a way that's useful to our purposes. So we could say that we put data into a database and then we take information out. The software that gives us the tools for building databases is referred to as, in generic terms, DBMS, Database Management System. And this software will give us tools for managing storage, backup, recovery, creating user accounts, setting constraints on setting properties so that some users have more access than others. And some examples of relational database software are Oracle, SQL Server from Microsoft, DB2 from IBM, MySQL, and Microsoft Access, which is also from Microsoft. So in this video we have seen a very brief overview of databases, particularly relational. We've mentioned SQL or SQL, Structured Query Language. We know there are terms for things other than relational databases, such as non-relational and unstructured. And we know about E.F. Codd and Peter Chen that played key roles in the early stages of developing relational databases. We also talked about the difference between data and information and what a DBMS is and what an ERD, Entity Relationship Diagram, is.